India has lured China into a trap. For years, the two powerhouse nations have been involved in a cat-and-mouse battle to gain ascendancy over the much-coveted Indian Ocean region. Only now, through canny political maneuvering and the signing of many trade and military treaties, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has outwitted his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. All of which has put India in pole position to control one of the most sought-after areas of the world. Make no mistake though, this isn't something Beijing will take lying down. And it's something the rest of the world will ignore at its peril. At this early point in the video, you would be forgiven for feeling slightly confused. Aren't China and India partners in one of the biggest intergovernmental associations in the world? BRICS? The answer of course is yes. So why have India and China become embroiled in what many see as dangerous Cold War-style posturing and rhetoric? Not to mention a huge buildup of military and strategic strength. In a geopolitical context, the answer to that question is as murky as it is complex. But the ultimate goal is simple enough to explain: the aforementioned riches associated with the Indian Ocean and everything that goes with it. The importance of this region, and who ultimately controls it, is nothing new, however. Way back in 1897, Alfred Thayer, an admiral in the US Navy, made this bold prediction: whoever controls the Indian Ocean will dominate Asia. The destiny of the world will be decided on its waters. From as early as the 3rd century BCE, the Indian Ocean trade routes have connected Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and East Africa. At present, more than 2/3 of the world's oil is transported through the region's waters. But it's not just oil exports that rely on this crucial trade route, but coal exports too. 3 nations with developing economies, Australia, Indonesia, and South Africa, now account for more than half of global coal exports, shipping much of it across the Indian Ocean to India, China, Japan, and South Korea. And what about the fisheries industry? According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, a truly staggering 11.3 million tons of fish were caught in 2010, about 14.6% of the world's catch. In the same year, 6 Indian Ocean nations, India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Thailand, Egypt, and Myanmar, supplied over 11.3 million tons of fish between them, as much as the rest of the regions combined. The Indian Ocean is not only one of the most lucrative maritime trade and fishing routes on the planet, but also home to vast natural resources, the majority of which have yet to be exploited to the full. According to Insight on India, IAS, nodules containing nickel, cobalt, and iron, and gargantuan sulfide deposits of manganese, copper, iron, zinc, silver, and gold are all present in huge quantities on the seabed. But it doesn't end there. The sediments found in the Indian Ocean are important sources of titanium, zirconium, tin, zinc, and copper. To qualify, back in 2017, the Indian Ocean economies accounted for 35.5% of global iron production, 17.8% of world gold production, 16.8% of the world's proven oil reserves, and 27.9% of proven natural gas reserves. That's just a small example of exactly what's at stake here, and why India and China have set themselves on a seeming collision course that could have huge global ramifications. Before we dig even deeper into this most intriguing of geopolitical chess matches, however, we need to give ourselves some demographic context. China and India are 2 of the biggest nations in the world. China has a population of over 4.1 billion. India has around 1.4 billion citizens. In terms of land mass, China boasts around 9.6 million square meters, about 3.7 million square miles, and India approximately 3.29 million square meters, about 1.2 million square miles. Last year, China's gross domestic profit, GDP, was $17.52 trillion. India's GDP for the same period was $3.75 trillion. Militarily, China has over 2 million active servicemen and women and a stockpile of 500 nuclear warheads. India has around 1.2 million active servicemen and women and 164 nuclear weapons, with the present capacity to increase that number to 200 in the near future. We're talking about true global heavyweights in every respect. But how did we get to where we are today? In 5 words: the Belt and Road Initiative. Back in 2012, Wang Jixi, of the Institute of International and Strategic Studies at Peking University, published a paper that would reshape Beijing's foreign policy objectives. In essence, his paper, Marching West, recommended that China turn away from its powerful allies of the United States in the East, the familiar faces of Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines, and focus more on Central Asia and the Middle East. When Xi came to power a year later, he initiated a new economic program, later known as the Belt and Road Initiative. Around that time, China had just started to send goods to European markets on trains that followed the 2,000-year-old Silk Road routes across the steppes of Central Asia. When other nations in Southeast Asia asked to be included, Xi was only too happy to oblige with a maritime Silk Road link between Southeast Asia and South Asia to East Africa. And thus, the Belt and Road Initiative was born. So why would this project lead to so much tension between China and India, especially when you consider the international investment the project attracted? By 2019, Hungary, Portugal, and Italy, a member of the group of 7 leading industrialized democracies, had signed agreements to cooperate. Saudi Arabia, Iran, and countries across Latin America and Africa quickly followed suit. Surely a new lucrative trade route is a good and positive development for all countries concerned. On paper, yes it is. But as alluded to at the start of the video, there are much bigger prizes at stake here. India's concerns about the Belt and Road Initiative are pressing and manifold. First and foremost, Modi fears that participating in the program would only strengthen China's strategic influence in the region. Naturally, this is something New Delhi wants to avoid at all costs. Granted, improving trade routes with China is all well and good, but India is rightly concerned about its own security and geopolitical interests. India has also expressed concern about the financial implications. The more vociferous critics in New Delhi argue that the Belt and Road Initiative gives China unfair leverage over other countries. If left unchallenged, this could lead to economic and political dependence on China, and eventually result in Beijing expanding its military presence in the Indian Ocean region. But how, exactly? Over recent years, China has adopted a dubious and, some would say, mercenary policy, whereby Beijing offers financial, infrastructural, or military aid to a lesser nation. However, the repayment terms have an ambiguous dynamic attached to them. In a CNN report from March 2023, China is said to have loaned massive sums to countries across Asia, Europe, and Africa, extending its global influence through mega infrastructure projects and becoming one of the world's biggest creditors in the process. According to Brad Parks, co-author of a joint study from the World Bank, Harvard Kennedy School, Kiel Institute for the World Economy, and the US-based research lab AidData, Beijing has created a new global system for cross-border rescue lending, but it has done so in an opaque and uncoordinated way. But what are we talking about in terms of figures? China has spent over $240 billion bailing out 22 countries involved in the Belt and Road Infrastructure project, including Argentina, Pakistan, Kenya, and Turkey. An act of global altruism, or a cynical way to exploit countries in their time of need, and make them indebted to you in more ways than just the financial. If we adopt the latter mindset, we can construct the following hypothetical situation. Your country is one of those bailed out by Beijing. Naturally, you're hugely grateful, even more so when Xi doesn't come hammering on your door for repayment anytime soon. But what happens if China's leader makes a request to, say, build a military base on your territory? One that might, for instance, make people in New Delhi very nervous indeed, a redefinition of the classic rock and hard place conundrum. And hence, we get to the crux of the matter. 2 behemoth nations with their eyes on the same massive prizes. But perhaps most tellingly of all, and this is as symbolic as it is of practical geographical concern, the route of the Belt and Road Initiative passes through hotly disputed Kashmiri territory that both India and Pakistan stake historical claims, namely Gilgit-Baltistan. This ethnically diverse Himalayan region was mired in controversy long before Pakistan won its independence from the UK in 1947. Under the partition plan contained in the Indian Independence Act, Kashmir was free to accede to either India or Pakistan. Hari Singh, the Maharaja, or local ruler, initially wanted Kashmir to be independent. However, in October 1947, he chose to join India in return for its help against aggression from Pakistani tribespeople. War broke out. India sought the United Nations intercession to decide the dispute, and even though a ceasefire ensued, the situation has remained volatile up until the present day, with a full-blown, if short-lived war breaking out in 1999, with tens of thousands of lives being lost. The eventual creation of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPC, in 2015 only added fuel to the fire. India felt this was a direct violation of its territorial sovereignty, and was the main reason why India refused to participate in the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI itself. Fast forward to today, and tensions still run high. In a report in the Hindustan Times from February 2024, former Ambassador Vishnu Prakash claimed that India is decoupling from China, and it was no longer business as usual between the two countries. Furthermore, he alleged that there is an unholy alliance between China and Pakistan that will thwart India's initiatives. However, the Belt and Road Initiative is only one part of the puzzle. As we'll shortly explain, both countries have been incredibly active in recent decades. Slowly but surely, they have attempted to gain a strategic stranglehold on the region. If China made one move, India was quick to react with a move of their own. And while China may arguably have the stronger allies, it's India who looks to have put the better military strategy into place to secure their short, medium, and long-term objectives. At the top of the video, we made a pretty bold and wide-reaching claim: India has lured China into a trap. But in every game of cat and mouse there is constant pursuit, near captures, and repeated escapes, never more so than when the diamond necklace and string of pearls strategies collided. Confused? Don't worry. Despite the somewhat elaborate imagery conjured by the respective names, these two strategies are easy to understand, especially if you visualize a map with a diamond or pearl adornment draped around the countries involved. Firstly, let's look at China's so-called string of pearls strategy for the Indian Ocean region. According to a report from China Briefing, China is primarily focused on strengthening its ties with Sri Lanka. Why? Simply put, China needs to secure foreign oil and trade routes that are critical to its expansion in the area. How? By establishing an increased level of influence along sea routes through investment, port development, and diplomacy. These investments extend from Hainan Island in the South China Sea through the littorals of the Straits of Malacca. It includes port developments in Chittagong, Bangladesh, Sittwe, Koko, Yangi, Khaokphyu, Mergui, and Zadetki Kyun in Myanmar, Laem Chabang in Thailand, and Sihanoukville in Cambodia. A wide net, indeed. To give you a better idea of the scale of the strategy, these routes run across the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Pakistan's Gwadar port, and islands within the Arabian Sea and into the Persian Gulf. But it hasn't all been plain sailing, far from it. And as the old saying goes, necessity is often the mother of creation. The lack of progress on the Kra Canal project in Thailand, which would directly link the Indian Ocean with the South China Sea, has been cited as a motivating factor in the development of this policy. Ultimately, it will provide a greater presence for China along the sea lines of communication that now anchor the country directly to the Middle East. Naturally, this has proved incredibly disquieting for both India and the United States. They don't know whether this strategy is intended to cement supply lines and trade routes, or whether China is aiming for regional supremacy. But if history teaches us anything, it's to plan for the worst eventuality. That way, you'll be prepared to act if circumstances go against you. India's response? The diamond necklace strategy, what could easily be described as a counter-encirclement strategy against the Chinese expansion we outlined a moment ago. Originally coined by former Foreign Secretary Lalit Mansingh, India has opted for a multi-pronged program, including the building of ports and extensive coastal surveillance radar systems to track Chinese warships and submarines. Ultimately, this will solidify defense ties, expand bilateral relations with South Asian countries, island nations in the Indian Ocean region, and Southeast Asian nations, and include regular military exercises with US, Japanese, and Australian naval forces. But what will this achieve, exactly? First and foremost, important military and strategic agreements with Vietnam, Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand have been signed, all of which will help India fight back against Chinese expansion in the region. Just as importantly, the strategy will help India access and build ports crucial for its own trade initiatives. But where will these ports likely be located? India is developing the Chabahar port in Iran, opening a new land-sea route to Central Asian countries and bypassing Pakistan. Strategically close to the Chinese Gwadar port, it is also located close to the Strait of Hormuz. This will put India in a great position since it overlooks the Gulf of Oman, a crucially important oil supply route. India is also building deep-sea ports in Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Myanmar with similar strategic objectives. Furthermore, Modi has signed agreements to access naval facilities in Oman and Singapore. This first facility is again close to the Strait of Hormuz, where over 30% of oil exports travel through. The second on the Changi Naval Base in Singapore is strategically located close to the Strait of Malacca, and it doesn't stop there. In 2022, India strengthened its historic links to Mongolia and added another diamond to its strategic necklace, an alliance too close to comfort, no doubt, for China. According to India's Economic Times, India has agreed to fund a new greenfield oil refinery project in South Gobi to the tune of $1.2 billion. No small change. India also knows the importance of building solid radar networks. For that reason, they have done deals with Bangladesh, the Maldives, Sri Lanka, Mauritius, and the Seychelles. By constructing ports and signing bilateral agreements, India hopes to improve trade ties with the respective nations and open different trade routes, all of which will help India to stymie Chinese influence in these countries and promote India's own economic objectives along the way. Even more worrying from a Chinese perspective, India is also a member of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, Quad, an informal alliance of nations comprising the US, Australia, India, and Japan. While not a formal alliance, Quad represents a strong and real challenge to Chinese hegemony on the global stage. Ostensibly, this group was set up after the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. Since then, however, one of the group's main objectives, even if not overtly stated, is to curb China's growing influence in the Indian Ocean and both the East and South China Seas. Back in 2022, right after the COVID-19 crisis, Japan hosted a summit to discuss the post-pandemic world. According to a report by the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, the leaders spoke of their resolve to uphold the international rules-based order where countries are free from all forms of military, economic, and political coercion. This broadside was clearly aimed at China's growing use of its economic might to achieve political gains. In that respect, Australia, India, and Japan have all recently felt China's coercive pressures. Speaking of Japan, China's historical adversary, Tokyo signed a trade deal with India back in 2011. The India-Japan Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement effectively eliminates tariffs on 90% of Japanese exports to India, including auto parts and electric appliances, and 97% of imports from India, including agricultural and fisheries products. But how does India's membership of these organizations and the signing of these trade deals affect its standing in BRICS? As mentioned at the top of the video, China and India aren't just antagonistic nations locking horns like rutting stags, but members of the same intergovernmental alliance. Founded in 2009 as BRIC, it wasn't until South Africa joined in 2010 that it became BRICS. The basic objective of the alliance was to give emerging economies more influence in international politics. Whether the group has achieved that objective is still up for debate. What can't be denied with the inclusion of more states, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, UAE, effectively joined on January 1, 2024, is the collective size and influence of the alliance. Let's give you the facts and figures to back that claim up. The expanded group has a combined population of about 3.5 billion or 45% of the world's inhabitants. Their economies are worth more than $28.5 trillion, or about 28% of the global economy. Over recent years, however, India has been an increasingly marginalized voice in the BRICS structure. Why? Quite simply, India has become involved with too many strategic partnerships. As a result, Modi has often found himself to be the odd man out when it comes to making many key decisions. In short, you can't be everybody's friend and ally, and it's impossible to keep Washington, Moscow, and Beijing happy when pursuing political, economic, and military agendas diametrically opposed to each of their best interests. So, has Modi spread India too thin and, in the process, watered down the country's influence in key strategic decision-making on a global level? And do the other member states of these organizations now see India as an unreliable ally? The answer, probably. But high-stakes political maneuvering is nothing if not a tightrope act. After all, the rewards are so huge. Let's look at an illustrative example from the Quad summit mentioned above. Naturally, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the humanitarian crisis in Europe it precipitated were high on the agenda. Tellingly, India found themselves in an incredibly awkward situation again, and for all the wrong reasons. As soon as Putin launched his invasion, all member states apart from India imposed brutal sanctions on Russia. But not only that, Modi failed to publicly condemn Putin's actions to the wider international community. Like Pakistan, India abstained from joining a UN resolution. To put that into the appropriate context, only Belarus, Eritrea, North Korea, and Syria openly refused to sign the resolution. Hardly the best company to be keeping in the broader global context. And again, we have to ask the question why. India is buying oil from Russia at a heavily discounted rate. While a report from Outlook contends that this is a means to secure India's energy security interests and shouldn't, therefore, be politicized in any way, shape, or form, it doesn't look good to the watching world. And it's something that won't have escaped Beijing's notice. With that in mind, what of India's future in BRICS and the other alliances it has joined in recent decades? For the time being, it looks as if Modi will keep to the status quo if possible, as he sees membership in organizations with such opposing strategic objectives as an unavoidable inconvenience. Whether that will lead to uncomfortable compromises or unavoidable confrontations later down the line remains to be seen. More important for India is its continued expansion and vigilance, as the global stakes couldn't be any higher. Now we are coming to the end of the video, we have a much clearer picture of the current situation, and just how India has reacted to China's expansion into the Indian Ocean region. Through the tireless work of its leader, India has responded to each geopolitical roll of the dice with a decisive move of its own. Be it in strategic, militaristic, economic, or political alliances, the diamond necklace looks as if it could put China on a tight leash for many years to come. But what do you think about the state of play at the present time? Has India really drawn China into a trap with its military strategy, or do you think Beijing has something else up its sleeve? With so much at stake, is an outbreak of hostilities between the two nations now almost inevitable? If so, who would come out on top? Both have powerful allies in the region and both are huge military powers in their own rights. Will the United States and Russia intercede? We only need to look at the destabilizing international effect of the war in Ukraine to know that another conflict is in no one's best interests. Tell us what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching the video.